Welcome to Flesh and Pod, a flesh and blood podcast, breaking down weekly news and notes from the tournament scene, community drama, game strategy, and more. And now, here are your hosts, Derek and Logan.
Hello, and welcome to a heartbreaking episode 113 of Flesh and Pod. My name is Logan. I'm your host, and with me is the, at this point,
it's episode 113. I should have saw this coming.
Yeah, I think that Mercury's in Gatorade or whatever too, and it's all kinds of fucked up.
Yeah, that would make sense because like my kids have been wild the past 2 days, and I don't know what's up with them.
They were up watching the Royal Rumble until like midnight last night.
Oh yeah, maybe that was part of it.
Yeah, my show prep has been really easy for this. It's I played in pre-releases, and so I've just been watching the Royal Rumble replay to catch up so that I was ready for any of that discussion. Yeah, that's been my show prep. It's been great. But I did make it out to 3 pre-releases and then drafted twice for heavy hitters.
That sounds like such a magical weekend.
It's really good. I do want to confirm one thing that is very important, and that is this set is fucking gas. It feels so good to play. Everything feels pretty viable. Like sealed, the one little maybe niche thing I have is that the default pool is KO. Kind of feels a little like, God damn it, I guess I got to play KO, which is kind of true. But the other side of the coin is that KO is the hero in the set to me that has the highest floor, but the lowest ceiling. The ceilings on the other heroes are fucking immense. And so I ended up playing every hero except for the Guardians and Rhinar. So I played I played KO
both Warriors.
KO.
Yeah. Yep.
And my first pool was KO. It was just pile, right? And that's it. Like what you have with KO pile is I have a bunch of shit that are blue 5s or some 6s to go along with it and a couple of pump effects. This is the best I'm going to do. Totally reasonable pool. And I went 3-1 with that. Felt fine. Next day, I feel like I'm stuck on KO again on the next pool. Again, same sort of story. Some windups, which the windups are incredible. We'll get there. But some windups and some 6s, a fairly decent pool, play KO, X1 again, right? Draft. This time I just forced Kasai straight up. And X1 only loss was in a Kasai mirror. And because they had Blade Flurry and I didn't. That'll happen. Not gonna play around it. Didn't know he had it until I saw it. And I was like, well, that's fucking bad. And so lost that one. Today, my only loss was today my pool was very good for Kasai. And so I played Kasai today in sealed. Again, X1, totally reasonable. My only loss was to Betsy, who did a 15 overpower to my head, followed by an 11 overpower to my head. And then just leaked the rest of it through because I was now you've presented 26 at me in 2 attacks. I need to try to recover here. And I almost got the corner on them. They had one more overpower attack in them. Okay. Felt fine there. Then the second draft today, I wound up winning on Olympia of all things. Because the only reason that I played Olympia was because somebody passed me the Olympia helmet. The specialized helmets are as good as advertised. Like the Chapo is just the best fucking card. I think it's dumb. And even the Olympia one, because all it's really ever doing is blocking 3. And Knucklehead, same story. It can just block 3. All very, very good. So that kind of points you in a direction when you see them. I was already in Warrior. Then I got that past him. Like, well, I guess I'm shifting. My idea was Kasai going to Olympia, grabbed every 3 for 7 Warrior attack, and every blue block 3 I could find. And worked out great. So everything feels really viable. We didn't hit, like, it was really weird. The entire weekend felt a little cold on opens, not super, like, nothing super like spicy or anything like that. There was the Fabled was opened at one of the events, and then a cold foil balance, a rainbow foil balance, and that was really about it. And then today it was Marvel Young Victor, Marvel Young Kasai, cold foil balance, rainbow foil grains, and check this out, Evo Magneto. The Evo, that's in the expansion slot, comes in cold foil. We found that out today.
That's wild.
Because it got opened. And I'm like, holy shit.
I mean, it is an Evo, so.
Yep, that's what I thought. I'm like, well, it's an Evo. That doesn't surprise me that much. But yes, it comes in cold foil. Very good looking. Like, very, very nice looking. So, over the course of the weekend, it was, the set is a ton of fun to play. I played a lot of rounds of Heavy Hitters Limited, and I'm super excited for Hartford. I'm not burnt out at all. Like, I just want to keep playing. So the format is hella fun. Lots of, just a lot of good things. Not much. Like I said, the only negative is like not really a negative, because almost in every set you're going to have something that's default, right? Like, that's just pretty common. It's sealed, specifically sealed.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It is common, but there's a part of me that feels like just because it has happened almost every time so far, it doesn't mean that it should. Like, I guess I would argue that, like, Welcome to Wrath, I don't think necessarily has Welcome to Rathe, excuse me. I know that upsets people when I say Rathe. That one I wouldn't say necessarily has a default.
How much sealed WTR have you played?
Sealed? Like 2 or 3 times. It's not a lot.
It's Guardian. Like, Bravo.
Is it
Bravo.
Guardian?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I could see it. I don't feel like it's by that much of a margin compared to the other ones, right? It's not the, Force Briar, Force Fi.
Oh, no. Well, but those you can't force. Like, it's your pool, right?
Well, right. But I just mean, like, you're forcing it because... So when I say force and sealed, what I really mean is that the other heroes have, like, a minimum requirement to even be functional. Like, you can't... Doesn't matter what your pool is. Like, you can't play Icelander if you don't have blue attacks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Arya was the super exception because there was no default hero. There was no... I
still feel like that one was Briar because of Thorn, unfortunately.
Right. Like, and that's usually Thorn, but if you didn't have a non-attacks, it didn't fucking matter.
Sure, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, if Thorn didn't exist, if it was just a different weapon, I do think that Arya would have been, like, the best showcase for that. But because of the existence of Thorn and then, like, no AB or whatever in that set, like, that felt problematic.
Sure.
Outsiders and Sealed, I think, is pretty open-ish.
Your pile, your default pile.
Your default pile is got to be Uzuri.
It's usually
right?
Uzuri.
Yeah. Just because it's the one that ultimately what it comes down to when you're looking at your heroes is, like, you say, what is the hero that requires the least amount to do its thing, right? And can you get away with playing the hero if you don't do its thing? So, like, when I look at Heavy Hitters, for example, Betsy is, like, fine to play, but also she's might as well have no, like, game text if you don't have
overpower
or wager. Excuse me.
If you can't overpower something, she's not good.
Right? You just don't have text. So it's stuff like that. And so, like, when I think about Welcome to Rathe, for example, Dory, I think, is another great example. Dory, I think, is so much fun in any, whether it's sealed or draft, any format where you're playing Welcome to Rathe, if you have enough sources of go again. But if you don't, then you're literally just handicapping yourself, right? Like, you might as well take an IP penalty or whatever because you're only, swinging once and blocking with the rest of your hand anyway.
Yeah,
so
100% true.
I don't know. I think it makes sense that KO would be the default because when I look at his stuff, he requires the least amount of investment to quote unquote get his payoff. So him being the default makes sense to me. But I do think that there is a possibility, a realm of existence where, at least for sealed and or draft or whatever, I guess, there's potentially like a set where there isn't just a this is your default. I will, however, say that in order to get there, I think what you sacrifice is uniqueness of character and design. Right? So I think that Flesh and Blood is probably better when you have cases like this, where you've got like one default and then other ones that are like you're capable of pulling them off. And then like part of it is just figuring out whether or not you opened or drafted enough to make it work. But if you have a scenario where any of them work, then chances are there's not much that difference between them, and that doesn't feel as fun or engaging to me. So
yeah, in the sealeds that I played in, it was pretty I guess common's the wrong word. It was pretty evident that if you had a pool that was directed somewhere other than, you know, just the KO pile, and had any specificity to it, you're probably going to beat the KO piles. The problem is having those cards, like, because it's sealed. You don't have any control. There's no agency. So there's, I mean, again, there's still big number go burr decks, which are great. There's no real, the only real go wide-ish decks are Kasai, which go ahead and give this to the world at large. Performance bonus and trade in Kasai are absolutely phenomenal. Like, so good. Because one of them makes your swords free and filters a little bit. The other one threatens an on hit and typically is going to get a card out of their hand before you start doing your shenanigans. So
you just reminded me I need to jam performance bonus into my really bad Riptide deck, because it's another from Arsenal gets go again card.
Yep, sure is. And it's, again, just throw reds really, but it feels pretty good.
Yeah. That Riptide deck doesn't run anything that's not the red versions, but
yeah, sure. But the blues are a little light, it feels like, in a lot of instances, especially with a lot of the cards. But then again, there's a ton of 3-for-7s. It makes sense that things feel a little blue light at times because blue light special, yada yada yada. But it makes sense, right? Because you don't want everybody to be able to block 2 3-for-7, or you block with 2 cards 3-for-7 every fucking turn, because that's boring. The turning on the class specific armor felt a lot easier than I thought it would be, and just as I expected, the blue make tokens cards, so Goblet of Bloodred Wine, Smashback of Veilhorn or whatever, and the Strong and Stout are all just amazing. They are fantastic. Do it all the time. They do so much work because they turn on your armor. They then give you the things you need in the first goddamn place to just like work through a turn. They are absolutely the types of cards that you want to be playing in this format. They are just perfect. But yeah, I think that really sums up my experience. Did you have any questions since you didn't get to go?
Yeah, what's it like to feel hope and joy and excitement in your life?
I think you've got that kind of wrong. I really don't feel any of those things most of the time.
Fair enough.
And
I guess we should explain for those who are not in the Discord. First of all, how dare you? But I was unable to attend any pre-releases this weekend. We had a number of them on Saturday, but I was only supposed to be able to make one, and it had to be the earliest one because I have had some issues with like my medication and things recently, and so I had an emergency scheduled meeting with a doctor Saturday in the like afternoon. So I basically had this window where I needed to hit the earliest pre-release on Saturday, or else I couldn't go to any. And then like my body just gave out on me and I overslept. Like that's the full story. I tried to get to a couple on Sunday. There were 2 that were like an hour away from me, but both of them were capped at 16 slots and they were sold out. I inquired about like waitlist stuff, but They never got back to me, so I assume that all their players showed up. And it makes sense because it's probably the same people who played on Friday and Saturday, and they had a blast, and they were like, yeah, let's go do that again. Because I have seen from a lot of people that the stores are, seeing people come back, or it's like people in communities were, not one and done for this set, that they were like, yeah, I had a lot of fun. Let's go do that again.
Yeah, a lot of repeat business, that's for sure. And, so usually the Sunday pre-release for us is the lightest attended because, one, it's a Sunday. Two, it's the third or fourth one on the weekend in the area. And people have a little bit of burnout, right? And that's fine. And we had 14, I believe, or 15. And out of that number, I think it was 2 people of that was their only pre-release on the weekend. Everybody else, it was a repeat. Like, it was a repeat, and several of them were 3Xers, me included. So yeah, the repeat business was strong. It really was. And we are not, those numbers would have been bigger to even today, but there's a snafu with we only got 1 kit. And that sounds like, oh, you had 14, so that's perfect. Well, no, it was me having to tell people, I don't know, I don't want, I'm not gonna cap it and lock people out. Like, we'll use the other, the prize packs to draft with it, or to give to get more people into the event, and pause prizes for people that are willing to pause prizes if we have to. I don't want to be in a spot where, and I'll get more promos. I don't want to be in a spot to turn people away. And I think that turned a lot of people off, where they're just like, well, if I can't guarantee that I'm going to get, my prizes today, I don't want to come. And it's like, yeah, what I should have said is it's me. I will delay my shit. Like, that probably would have been the correct thing to say, but I didn't. But yeah, it was overall, the first one I was at 16, the second one I was at 23, third one I was at had 14, and then, like I said, 2 drafts. Sounds great. Like, it was a good time. Any other questions? Because I don't have hope or joy, really. There are some things I do look forward to on occasion, like calling Hartford.
Yeah, what's it like to look forward to the calling in Hartford?
Fantastic, honestly. I'm really looking forward to the people I get to see there, most of all. So because there will be a Flake and an Az and a Greg and a Bryn and a Rich and a Papa Mike, and probably people I'm not even thinking of right now. That
isn't Mara going?
Oh, and Amara. Yep, you are correct. There is also Mara. Yeah,
and isn't Tommy
Fresh?
Actually?
Yeah, Tommy Fresh. Gary, the Viscerai pillow guy. Yeah, there's just a ton of people, and so I get to see all them, and it's great because I haven't seen them in a while, right?
Yeah.
Outside of Flake, like I saw Flake recently, obviously, but Bryn and Greg, the last time I spent time around them was in October. So yeah. How many days till pitchers and catchers report? 26. Or no, till report. 10 days. 2 weeks until the first spring training game.
Who are you talking to right now?
The Discord.
Yeah, but they're gonna hear this like days later.
I forgot we weren't doing After Dark. Like, that's the biggest thing right now, is I forgot we weren't doing After Dark.
I was just like,
I'm looking at the chat.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that's what you were doing, but I just wanted to make it like aware that that's what was happening.
Listen, I may have been drinking.
So Big Lou, when you hear this, he was responding to you live.
Yeah. I need to get better at this. You would think that after 113 weeks in a row, I would have figured this shit out by now, but whatever. Cheers, I guess. So moving on, or transitioning, or whatever you want to say, there wasn't a whole lot of news. Most of everything was dedicated to pre-release. Really, this weekend was just kind of the hype wagon type of stuff. There was a little bit with a interview on Riddler Man Gaming. Go ahead and check it out. Riddler Man's one of our viewers too. And with Saint Hung and James Curry, JC, talking about distribution and allocation and print runs for the newer sets. And Saint got a lot of info at the Celebrational. And without like being super specific, provided a little bit of insight, and I thought it was very well thought out, and gave a lot of insight into where the head of LSS is at, and it's all very encouraging. So if you get a moment to check out Riddlerman's YouTube channel, please do. # no free ads. You owe me at least something for that, but but check out that interview. It's very, very good. Or that, I guess, three-way conversation, I should say. And a lot of good information in there for people who have like kind of that concern about longevity and collectability and stability within the game and stuff like that. Have concerns about overprinting and things like that. A lot of those questions get answered or talked through. And again, everybody on that show seemed to kind of come to the same consensus of things are pointing in the right direction and the sky is not falling. And I know a lot of people have been feeling like the sky is falling. It's not. If you want to see falling skies, go look up the One Piece drama from this weekend. That's falling skies. Because holy shit. For those of you that don't know, One Piece, the Bandai TCG, had one of their larger tournaments this weekend. They announced somewhere in the middle of the tournament that they were changing it to play 11 rounds on day one before cutting to day two. And this was at like 7:30 p.m. and they were in round 8. So
yeah, something like that.
Not good. And then in the middle of like round 9 or at the end of round 9, they then said, oops, sorry, we made a decision again. And we're actually going to cut it at round 10 today. And then for the cutoff for day 2. So a lot of people who were alive playing it into the 11 round were then chopped off of day 2. And then they announced that they were just going to reprint all the sets. Right.
Yeah.
Great. So all those people I
was going to say, which is funny because like on the one hand, there's a lot of people that are very excited about that because some of the product has been very hard to get. But on the other hand, there's also a lot of people that are like kind of upset because they are now looking at their cards, quote unquote, losing value, and revisit some of those conversations that we've had here, right? Kind of depends on what you're in the game for and what your purpose is, but yeah. that thing was, I mean, that's just like all, of course, like the very high level part of the story, because there were there were multiple rounds where they had to do multiple repairings
in the middle of the round.
In the middle of the round, there were times where they would say, like, don't use the app, it's not reliable, use the website, and then the website wouldn't load, so they'd say you need to report on the app, and then the app would be wrong, and blah, blah, blah. There were issues, so depending on... So this was their, like, nationals, and so at the start of when they were doing this, there were a limited number of qualifiers at the beginning of, like, the national season, we'll call it, where if you won them or did well at them, you could earn buys. And I think it capped at 2 buys. Like if you did really well, you got 2 buys. And if you hit a certain threshold or whatever, you had 1 buy. And when people showed up, so like part of the reason this thing started, like even round 1 started so late, was because they were manually like handling the buys. Like it wasn't already like, if you as a player, you weren't pre-flagged in the system, like you had to come up and stand in line and tell them. So like, I don't even know how they were verifying that if they didn't have them in a system somewhere. But then they would like have to manually handle your buy. And then a bunch of them were still getting paired anyway. And then they'd have to go back in line and get taken out. And then they'd get paired again anyway. And they'd have to go back in line and get taken out. And then I've heard that like round 3 or something like that, a bunch of the people who had buys, and it's probably has something to do with the way the tiebreakers work, but I think it was just an unforeseen consequence of this. A bunch of the people who had buys all immediately paired into each other.
Right.
So
because their
like
the buys
didn't matter. You were like potentially immediately punished because you're like, okay, well, I'm facing off against, other players that were good enough to have earned buys. But then also the other interesting bit here is like during the qualification part, they like stopped doing those. So it was only like a couple of, or a small handful of, or whatever events where you could even earn these buys. And then a bunch of other people, you still played in events, but you didn't earn buys. And then on top of that, it was like a semi-open event where you could just sign up for it. And a bunch of people like couldn't sign up for it because it capped out quickly. And then there was like issues like I heard that the venue, you know, space wise and whatever was great, but of course, like it's a California convention center. So I was hearing stuff like a water bottle was like $7 or something like that. And I just say that out loud because I know some people were complaining about like the prices of water in Barcelona. And I was like, oh man, these people have never been in an American convention center because this seems pretty cheap for water for me. But yeah, I mean, it was just chaos. And again, it was supposed to be 11 rounds day one. First of all, I don't even know how you plan for 11 rounds. Now, granted,
start at 6 a.m.
If you're also wondering, granted, the rounds are supposed to be like 35 minutes. Supposed to be. None of them were. And then another complaint I heard was like day 2 for like their top cut stuff. They don't move to untimed rounds. They're still timed rounds. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. So appreciate
what you got.
Flesh and blood events.
Yeah,
my children.
So this is the nice thing about participating in a card game that was built for competitive play. It was built for competitive play. So the infrastructure for competitive play is already there. We may not always agree with it and how it functions, but it functions. And that's more that can be said for what One Piece put forward for this tournament.
Yeah.
Again, moving on. So because there isn't a lot of newsworthy type of stuff to go over, kind of just decided to talk through where we're at in Flesh and Blood. There's a lot of moving parts that are going on right now in card gaming, in living, in the world, which is on fire most of the time. And, you know, we all have our little spots in it. And we try to carve out whatever joy we can when we can, right? And that's why we play games. Most of us, some of us are just degens, but others, you know, they get joy out of these things, or at least some sort of fulfillment. And it's important sometimes to kind of take note and take a pulse check and find out where you are. And we haven't done this in a while. I don't know if Derek and I have ever done this exercise. It's like Jordan and Abby and I did, I know. But I don't know that we've ever done this. So we're going to take some long form discussion on a couple of different questions and sort of like talk through this a little bit. And it might not be one of our most enlightening episodes as far as dick jokes and tomfuckery, but hopefully you'll get something out of this and what we think and where we're at. And if you don't, hopefully it's still entertaining. That's all I got. But so the first one, topic that I had is just your straight up relationship with Flesh and Blood. So we've both been playing the game about the same amount of time. We both started on Monarch, if I remember right. And Monarch Aria, that general area. And I know that my relationship with the game has evolved quite a bit in that time, and some of it very rapidly. But, and I've talked to that a ton on here, but Derek, where do you think you're at versus where you started and versus where you were when you started on this show?
Oh, I'm not in a good place, actually.
Right.
that's the reality. And it's not for a lack of desire. The reality is that when I first started playing the game, and even when I first joined the show, I was just playing more. And part of it was just circumstances at the time. Part of being able to play the game means having the time to play it. And as my kids get older, they take up more of my time. My duties and responsibilities have shifted with my day job. That's been eating up more of my time. Casting gigs for various games, not just Flesh and Blood, but others come and go, and that eats some of my time. And so really this last year, I found myself playing, but not nearly as much as I wanted to, and definitely not as much as I wanted to play in person. I played a shameful number of games actually physically in person this past year. And like, yeah, I can jam Talishar games, you know, whenever I want basically, but that just does not feel the same. Like it's good for a practice thing, but like, that's not why I wanted to play the game. Like the game's called Flesh and Blood for a reason. It feels good to sit in the flesh and blood and play the game across from somebody and have that shared experience and have fun. And Talishar, great for practice, but even for practice, like you have to be careful because, you know, there was a period for one of the ProQuest seasons where I did a bunch of practicing on Talishar and then I went and played in person and I made a bunch of mistakes that really were because of not having the physical reps, right? Like you get into a cadence of doing things. It's very easy to, you know, miss a tunic counter or, you know, forget about your pitch stack. Not like forget about it, but I just mean like you get into a certain cadence of like if Talishar is doing it a certain way for you at different times and then you're not rearranging them before you put them back on the bottom of your deck to set yourself up for the best success possible in a second cycle. That stuff matters. Yeah, so like really when I say I'm not in a great place, it's mostly because I have not fallen out of love of the game. In fact, I would almost say that like my enjoyment of the game is probably greater now than it was when I first started, because I think I just have a better overall understanding of the game now. When I first started, like it was fun, and a lot of that fun comes from like, ooh, a new shiny and I'm learning the new thing. But also now I just feel like I have a much better understanding. And so like I can appreciate some of the nuances and whatever. But again, a lot of those niche scenarios or nuances or fun things only pop up like when you're playing the game, and they tend to pop up more, in my opinion anyway, when you're not on autopilot just trying to jam games for practice, but like when you're in the moment. And so playing in person matters a lot. So yeah, I'm not where I want to be, but that's mostly because I just want to play more this year. And it's extra difficult because I don't know how I'm going to accomplish my goal. So I very quickly realized at the beginning of this year that I did not like the limited number of games I got to play in person this past year. And I wanted to put an emphasis and an effort on playing in person. But I've been thinking through like the year upcoming, and I was like, man, I don't know what else I can do or how else I need to like tackle this to be able to carve out more time without impacting other stuff, right? Like at the end of the day, I have to weigh it between, you know, do I want to spend less time with my kids to go play, you know, because then I'll feel guilty about, you know, the dad side of things, or, you know, have less date nights and be like a worse husband on that sort of things. Or do I want to like turn down, you know, casting opportunities? Like, do I want to say like, hey, you know, Realm guys, like, I love you, but I don't want to cast. I want to play this time. Like, theoretically, like I guess I have the ability, I have the power to say like, no, I don't want to cast this one. But one, I like casting too. That's not something I want to give up by any stretch of the imagination. But I'd also feel like I was, you know, letting people down, right? If they expect me to cast or they're depending on it or whatever, and I say, you know, hey, I'm not going to do it, but I'm still going to be there. That to me, I'm sure they would receive it better than what I'm imagining. But to me, that feels like a slap in the face, right? That's like, I don't want to do the thing for you, but I'm going to come enjoy your event anyway, or whatever. Like that just, I don't know, feels weird to me. So yeah, that's, I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I don't know where at this time anyway, I'm going to be able to fit it in. I just know that, I want to play more, and I want to do more with just like with the game overall. One of the things I've kind of like promised to myself is that this year I'm going to try to limit my branching out, because a lot of times I got my tendrils in a bunch of different things just because I'm trying to like stay on top of things or chase down leads or whatever. That's kind of what you have to do as a content creator, and as a caster, especially if you want gigs. But I feel like this year my goal is to really settle in, and I'm going to put the bulk of my attention and my emphasis on Flesh and Blood and Star Wars Unlimited, because those are the two games that I just objectively enjoy the most. and then I'm going to continue my both like my monitoring out of curiosity for one game, and like my support of the other, because I think that it, you know, has great people and has a lot of potential, and that's Altered and Alpha Clash. So if you're not familiar, Altered is a trading card game that is going to be coming out soon. It's going to be hitting a Kickstarter, I think,
End of February.
End of February. I was going to say it's like a month or less away. It is not like any other card game I've ever seen, and I always respect anybody who's trying to do something new or innovative in the space, even if it fails. Like, just the sheer fact that they're going to try something different, I respect it. So I'm keeping an eye on it. The things that make Alter different are, one, it's not technically 1v1 like combat oriented gameplay. So it's like a 1v1 game, but you, like, the entire game is tailored around exploration, right? So you win by having your hero and his or her companion meet, right? Like, you're both exploring a new territory, and you're basically racing to get them together. So it's very accessible, because you don't have to worry about, you know, combat or, you know, coverage wise saying things like, you know, kill and blah blah blah. Like, it usually comes with the card game territory because you're very combat centric. So this is going to be a very accessible game. But the other really innovative thing that they're doing is, like, when you open a pack, you scan the cards into your collection. So if you've ever played like Pokemon, for example, you know that you can have a digital you know, pack. Whenever you buy a real pack, you can scan in a digital pack as well. But it's not like that. This digital collection tracker that they themselves are going to put out is for your physical card collection. And once you have, you know, ownership of a card, you can print them on demand for yourself. So, like, if your deck gets lost or stolen, but you have the rights to these, I mean, you pay a fee for the printing, but you can, like, literally have a new set of cards shipped to your door.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things that they're doing so that you can, like, work in foilings of things and you know, alternates and rare versions of things and whatever. But, like, just that core concept of, like, we're going to track your collection digitally, but anytime you want cards, like, we'll just ship them to your door, like, it's interesting. It's something new. So I'm keeping my eye on that. No idea if they're going to do anything competitive, but I just like it when people do, you know, innovative stuff. Alpha Clash, you know, we've talked about it in the past. I think that they are, you know, taking the right strides. Set 2, I think, was definitely big steps in the right direction in terms of enjoyability and playability. They're growing in that space, so I'm going to keep my eye there. But I'm going to, like, I'm like setting this as my rules for myself now at the beginning of the year, because I do have a tendency to want to do all the things.
Oh yeah.
And I'm going to try really hard to keep my focuses down this year so that I can just play more games. Because, again, ultimately that's what it comes down to. I just want to play more games.
Yeah, no, and I get that. And I think for me, it's similar. So when I started Flesh and Blood, it was as a coming here as a still the mentality of the Magic grinder, right? Still the person that drove to every weekend to some PPTQ or whatever qualifier and bumfuck anywhere, and flew to Grand Prix that were anywhere that was remotely accessible. Like, I'm not going to goddamn casino in Valley Forge, fucking Pennsylvania, but, you know, Vegas or Dallas or wherever. It's, you know, very similar to what I do for callings, although I am going to bumfuck Hartford. But so I approached the game from that mentality, right? That grinder mentality. And the one thing, relationship wise, that's the biggest change, is this. A lot of people that knew me in the Magic days, or know me from the Magic days, when I started doing this, they're like, I never knew why you just didn't start doing this for Magic. I'm like, bloated space, I felt like I'd just be talking to myself, and that's no fun. And, you know, the thing that would hurt the most is I knew that I would love it. I knew it was something that I would fundamentally enjoy. And if I was just doing it for myself, the enjoyment would be less. Right. And at the end of the day, like, at heart, I am an entertainer. I enjoy entertaining. I like having an impact that is in some way, shape, or form positive, whether it's humor, whether it's picking somebody up when they're down, whether it's even having the ancillary effect of, somebody listening to the show on a Tuesday when things aren't going right, and we're comfort. That means the world to me. And that's become my relationship with Flesh and Blood. I still have a grinder's brain that won't go away. And it's hard on me a lot of the time having a grinder's brain, because I am so much fucking worse at this game now than I was before I started this show. Like, that's not a joke when we talk about how doing things like this soak up time. And that's time that you could be using to be better at the game that you are essentially talking about. That I've spent hundreds of hours being on Wax, and times 4 amount of hours editing and collecting, and researching and show notes and traveling and everything else that kind of goes with the territory. And if you translate those hours into jamming games, if you translate that into practicing, now granted, I'm in my 40s with an insect brain. It isn't necessarily going to soak up the way it used to, but I can guarantee you, because I can guarantee you I'd be better than I am right now. And
quick math tells me, given our lackluster attempts at keeping our episodes brief, we are recording episode 113 right now, which means you're probably at around 200 hours of your own personal time just on air, not even counting all the other stuff.
That's just on air.
Just the parts where you're doing what you're doing right now. That's
Correct.
A lot of time.
Yeah. And that's not counting all the times I've guested on other shows. That's not counting the ancillary insert episodes we've done a few times. That's not counting the time I put on air for Alpha Clash, which isn't Flesh and Blood, but still, it's another show that's on air, which isn't a ton. We'll fire that back up.
Time spent on reveal video.
Oh,
singular.
Yeah, singular.
So far.
Just the one. Just the one. But the investment to me is worth it. The hard part is finding half that time to invest into the grinder mindset again and put myself at least back to being better than respectable at this game. Would be like somewhere that I want my relationship to be. I want to be somebody that, is competent, that I can sit down across from somebody and, they might get me, but I'm not going to make it easy. And that's fun for me. That's enjoyable for me. Winning and losing, I used to take wins and losses like really, like they were very important to me in every way, shape, and form. And that's softened up a lot. It was never really that hardcore in Flesh and Blood, but in Magic it certainly was. And that softened up a lot. I for whatever reason, I'm okay if I lose a game of Flesh and Blood, because a lot of times, I mean, that's not even a lot of times, if I lose a game of Flesh and Blood, odds are I had a ton of agency in this game. I didn't get mana screwed. I didn't get mana flooded. Whatever. I had agency in my decision making. There were ways I could have won this game. It wasn't over, on turn 2 when I missed a land drop, right? As happens in Magic quite a bit with a lot of variants happening. Here, that agency is important. And so it makes the losses not sting as much, because the only person I can blame is myself, and that's fine. I'm cool with blaming myself. I mean, I do it all the fucking time. But
I mean, it's very handy. I blame all my losses on you too.
Okay, well. Huh. No. Well, shit. I did just say that spending time on this show takes away from practice time, which makes you worse. Can you get that fucking Smucker's face off, you piece of shit?
I love seeing your face react in real time because it starts with the wait, what'd you say? No, that's not right. Well, actually, damn, he's right. I got to deal with that dumb face. Like everything, I can just read it all over. It's so good.
Okay,
I needed that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you got it, you prick. But yeah, so I guess where I'm at relationship wise is a lot different from when I started. And probably not that much different than I was a year ago. Except I want to be a bit more community engaged than I have been. And I also just, I want to make sure I'm putting in the time to be as, good competitively as I can be at this game with whatever else I have going on. And I've been laxing in that, but I do have some people now that I can bounce things off of, deck lists, jam games that make it a little bit easier. I mean, in-person reps are still going to be at a premium, but I feel like, I feel like right now, improving my community interactions along with just becoming a little bit better in the game, I think is where I want my relationship to be. But right now my relationship is really, this show is the centering point of my relationship with the game. Wow. Okay. So we're 46 minutes into this.
Yep.
Why can't we do anything short? I mean, I can, it's just,
not this.
It's not this. Next one, this is kind of a little bit more cut and dried, but it can be kind of answered in a lot of different ways. Where do you think that Flesh and Blood is 5 years from now? I mean, the first time that we ever broached this question was on a roundtable with right after the first Pro Tour. We kind of talked through the future of the game. There was Flake, Elaine, as Jordan, myself, and I believe Tommy. And we dug into this a little bit, but that was 2 years ago. And we're in a different spot now than we were 2 years ago, for sure, as far as the game is considered. So
yeah, but we're going to be going back there pretty soon.
What happened to then?
Well, so the last time the Chiefs and the 49ers played in the Super Bowl, like shortly thereafter, we had a pandemic. So I just assume we're all going back in the hole soon.
Yeah. Okay. But at least, well, I don't know. I haven't looked to see if Detroit is burned down tonight. But where do you think Flesh and Blood is 5 years from now?
I mean, I guess step one, right? Just to get it right out of the gate. I think it's still going. I don't think it folds up in the next 5 years. I think that there was a lot more concern about that happening in previous years, just because usually year two is like the first benchmark, but even that doesn't mean you're out of the water. And I think that like year 5 is truly where, if you can make it to year 5, and I don't mean like limp into year 5, because there's been plenty of games that have been around for 5 or more years, but they experience growth and then they start trickling off, and then they just kind of like maintain their loyal player base as it slowly bleeds to death, and then the company also like bleeds to death with it.
Yeah.
But we've now hit, essentially year 5 with Flesh and Blood, and while the growth isn't as explosive as it was in the early days, we're still seeing it. Like they're opening at new markets. We're still seeing an increase in the meaningful events that are being ran. We just had the celebrational. I don't think that there are, at least publicly, any signs of it being in a position where we expect it to take that hard of a downturn or a nosedive. So I would predict that it's definitely still going 5 years from now. I don't think, just because of the nature of the game as is, that we will see a continued level of like expansive growth. It's very clear to me that LSS is putting an emphasis on the new player experience and that they want to attract new players, and they're trying to make the game more accessible. And I do think that they will see some returns on that investment. I just don't think that it's going to be the same level of growth, because when a game is new, everybody kind of has that you know, you want to get on the ground floor. To me, it's like, if you're from the comic book space, and I know Logan's going to know exactly what I'm about to mention, but everybody buys the first 1 to 3 issues of a comic, right? Like, you can't judge your growth or your sales or anything on issues 1 through 3, because everybody wants to get on the ground floor. And then if they've got something from that, you know, first release, then, ooh, shiny, and like, maybe I'll get money from it later, blah, blah, blah. Really, you kind of have to see how things are doing, you know, deeper into the run. And as far as like that analogy goes with Flesh and Blood, now we're deep enough into the run that like, we know who our audience is and we know how to get new people on board. And I think that they have a plan for doing that. It's just not going to be at the same level as when you have a brand new comic book coming out. You know what I mean? So I think that we're still around for in the next 5 years. We're still experiencing some growth. And I am just going to say that I think PvE is officially released by then.
Maybe.
No, I'm going with it.
Right.
I'm saying within 5 years. It is January 28th, 2024. So I'm going to say that I'm going to even give them a little bit of a bump. I'm going to say that before 2029. So sometime in calendar year 2028 or before, we're going to get PvE finally released. And I will say that depending on how well that goes and what kind of reception that gets, that will also impact a lot of the like new player growth, because I think you could see a second wave of players come in just to try that out. As somebody who's played a lot of games that have offered both, like Legends of Runeterra, for those of you who don't know, there's like the obviously competitive part of the game, but there's a mode called Path of Champions that historically a lot of people love to just sign in and play. And it's basically like Slay the Spire, but for Legends of Runeterra, and it's a lot of fun. And if Flesh and Blood can create something like that, where like you have your heroes and you sit down with your friends and that's like your dungeon party and you go play a game, like, yeah, I think that will help the game a ton. So if they can get that released and they, you know, get the experience relatively right, I think that it'll be great. But that's my high level view. I'm already talking long, so I'll just shut up now.
No, absolutely. I want you to.
5 years is a lot of time to think about, you know. So
no, it is.
It's, you know, it's not like, hey, what do you think's going to happen like this year and next year? Like 5 years is a pretty big gap, and there's a lot that can happen in between.
Clearly another pandemic because Niners and Chiefs.
Oh, well, yeah. So like, how, you know, that's just it. How do they survive that? And I think that the answer will be PvE. So that'll be when they launch, you know, Fab 3.0, and it'll be at the height of Pandemic 2.0.
God damn it. Why do I live in the world? So one of the things I think that you mentioned, and I think it's important to realize for people, is no one is ever going to make Magic the Gathering again. And what struck me was the comic book analogy. You're 100% right. Like, yeah, seen it a bunch where episodes 1 through 3 fly off the shelves and then people quit because they didn't get either their fucking investment, you know, sure, didn't return them immediate money, or the book just wasn't good. And that happens, right? Like, it does. But what people expect is that when they get issue number 1, that they're holding Fantastic Four number 1, or they're holding X-Men number 1. Those are singular events. Those won't happen again because those were done. And that was the era where it was different, I guess is the best way to put it. And because of how different the era of comic books was then versus now, producing them, they weren't treated as collectibles. They were treated as magazines. They were thrown around. They were.
I was just about to say that I think that what gets lost with a lot of people, both when it comes to card games and comics and toys or any collectible, is that part of what makes them valuable is that people actually fucking enjoyed them. Right?
100% true.
If people in the 60s bought all the X-Men books and they sat on them, that's a bunch of people also not reading them. And if people bought all of those vintage toys and they left them in the boxes, then that's kids not playing with them. And part of the reason that now as adults everybody wants them is because we have really good memories of the shit we did with them.
Correct.
So that's why I always get so heated when we talk about like TCG investors, because it's like, yeah, part of the reason that MTG was so successful was you didn't have a bunch of people buying the alpha shit and sitting on it. They were opening it and playing with it and having a good time.
Yeah. It wasn't an investment. It was this is, you know, a new thing that we're doing. And so those cards, you have to remember, Magic came out in 1993 and card sleeves didn't exist yet.
Nope, you raw dogged it.
Those were just things being shuffled. They were rubber banded together. They were thrown around. They were beat the shit beat out of them because they were supposed to be played.
Yeah,
they weren't.
Actually, I remember one of the things that like really started, I think sleeves were available before, but at least in my local community, the thing that really started the trend of like, oh, you've got to play with sleeves was the World Championship decks.
Oh, the Champo decks? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because people wanted to use stuff from that as proxies, and obviously they had a different back. They didn't have the standard MTG back. So they were like, all right, well, we'll just throw them in sleeves, and then you can't tell the difference. And then that was literally how it caught on with playing with sleeves at my local store.
Yeah, and so think today, right? You open a Heart of Fyendal, and you want to throw that card in a deck. You're not throwing it in an unsleeved deck. You know that the thing you're holding has value. Now, how much differently would you act if that thing didn't have value right now? How much would that change your actions? Substantially, right?
I'll even go a step further. What if there was also no way for you to even know that it had more value than any other card you opened? Another thing people I think miss is that those early Magic sets, Alpha, Beta, even like Unlimited, Revised,
even through Stronghold, Tempest, Exodus era.
Like, there were no rarity symbols, and they didn't like with Tempest and stuff. They started at least like revealing to you like these are rares or whatever. But like when those first
Exodus was the first set that had colored rarity symbols.
Well, colored rarities, but there was like talk about the rare slot because people started decoding it by then. But I'm talking those early days, like if you were opening like, you know, a pack of Revised or Unlimited, you didn't even know, quote unquote, what the rare was.
No,
like
you didn't.
They all looked the same, and there wasn't the internet, so you weren't like crowdsourcing, hey, what cards came in what slots or whatever. It was just your local store, right? Like you opened it and you played with what was there, and you know, it just completely different mindset. And that's part of the reason.
But you're never recreating that experience.
Never.
That's the point. And because you're never recreating the experience, people are always trying to they jump on these bandwagons because they want to be on the ground floor of the next Magic the Gathering. There is no next Magic the Gathering. There fucking isn't. And that's not to say that Magic's the be all end all. It's not. Other games can be as good or better. It's the zeitgeist. It's the moment in time that created the market that we live in now, or the ecosystem that we have of collectible card games. It's that moment, that blip, that created everything that has led to now. But you can't go back then. You can't go back to, you know, make Fantastic Four #1 just with different names and expect people to treat it the same. It's not the same, because that's the first superhero team in reality, or whatever it is. You know, like again, not that can be argued, but that's not what's important. What's important is those moments can't be recreated. So when people are chasing these new TCGs and stuff like that, they don't get it.
I also think that they failed to apply context, because it's not just that Magic was successful. A lot of people say, well, you know, like just like Hearthstone, they had first to market stuff. Well, technically they didn't.
Right.
A lot of people don't know this, but there was like a legal battle between them and Wyvern. I know a guy whose fiance's dad was one of the original people who was bought out by them. So I've heard some fun NDA stuff in the background, but like there were other games. This is my fast way of saying there were other games at the time. It wasn't necessarily just first to market. A lot of it was that it was the best of the games, playability wise. It had the right like art direction and to capture the right adult audience. Because the thing you have to understand is back then, Magic was really only played by people that were like middle class or better. It was entirely disposable and like discretionary income. And I think that when a lot of people talk about like the negative aspects of the culture that resides in the MTG community, I think one of the things that often gets glossed over is the fact that it was like wealthy white dudes that were playing it most of the time, because in the 90s, that's the only people who could afford it. Like, I grew up in a trailer park, and my purchases for Magic the Gathering were far and few between the people I knew. And I knew the kind of people who were buying into it, and they were your middle or upper middle class white dudes. But there's also another huge thing that I think gets glossed over when you talk about how Magic became successful. And that is that even though it wasn't that company, Magic got an assist and an extra layup from Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think that Magic exists today if it were not for Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Also having incredibly successful runs in those early days, especially Pokemon in the 90s and then Yu-Gi-Oh! In the early aughts and whatever, because
the gateway drug.
The gateway drug. The people who were playing Magic were already old enough that those games didn't appeal, but the people who were starting to play Pokemon then, by the time Magic got good and they had their entrenched player base, and they were like, hey, I really like Pokemon, but I want to try something else. Well, then people said, okay, come play the adult game, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if that was truth or fiction or whatever, like that was how you sold it. And that's where people migrated. And so those were very much in favor of like Magic's growth. And so part one is like, you'll never have, as you were saying, like that, you'll never have that Fantastic Four #1 experience again, or the X-Men #1, because like that moment in time is gone. But also it's not even just like, if you could time travel back and do that, there is so much that went into like the ecosystem that allowed Wizards to do what they've done, that you can't just have a good product. It's also got to be right place, right time. And a lot of businesses don't cop to it enough, but you got to get lucky. Like that's just the reality.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100% true. As far as like in my mind, where Flesh and Blood is in 5 years, I think largely on the same trajectory it is now. I agree with you that the explosion of growth is, was early, and that's expected, right? So they're working a lot on new player experience, what I think is appreciated. Well, I know it's appreciated. I know that people are responding really well to it. The thing that I think that they can't lose sight of, and so far they haven't, like, I'm not saying they have. What I am saying is that they have to make sure that they still kind of stick to it, is retention. And we've seen dips in attendance for armories and locals and things like that, kind of in a lot of different places, but we've seen increases in other places. It's still a game that doesn't feel like it's as interconnected as it needs to be. And a lot of that is because there is no online client. I'm not saying that there will be in 5 years an online client for Flesh and Blood. I just wouldn't be surprised if there is. Not because of any, like, to not have one in 5 years would probably just be an act of stubbornness.
And I think, honestly, I think James is willing to stick to that. Here's my hot take.
Sure.
Here's my hot take. Are you ready?
I've taken many of your hot takes.
If Flesh and Blood has an online client, it will either feature as like its main attraction, or it will only be the PvE version first. I think that they will do an online client for PvE before they ever do one for competitive. And I think that the reason will be because they want people to, like, play with their friends across the seas or whatever. And the whole point is to still play together. But I think that the competitive experience of Flesh and Blood, whether it's right or wrong, I just have a hard time believing that 2024 version of James White would ever agree to that. Now, again, it's 5 years. Who knows? 5 years. But I'm just saying, like, right now, I have a hard time believing he would ever do that. And honestly, I think a lot of people misunderstand how big of an undertaking that is, because that is not a cheap thing to do, massive. To develop that.
Yeah.
And once you start talking about like competitive play and prizing and all sorts of that stuff, like, you've also got to make sure that's bug free. That's a whole other level of like player satisfaction and like expectations that you have to manage. And there's so much there that even if it's something that I would selfishly want. I honestly think it would probably be a mistake for them to try doing that. The PvE, the reason I say that I would expect that first is because, one, you can say again, like, well, this is meant to be a social thing where you can play with friends who are, across oceans. But also, like, if you have a bug or whatever, at the end of the day, like, it's not a huge deal. You know what I mean? So that's my hot take. I think PvE will get an online client before competitive does.
I agree with you. And I think that the benefit of an online PvE client is going back to the gateway drug thing. Because you can go ahead and get somebody involved that isn't already involved, as a new player in playing PvE Flesh and Blood with their friends online that are players or whatnot, learn the game and be like, you know what, I kind of want to play this now. And then it becomes the physical game. So that, I mean, it's an avenue, right? Everything is an avenue for growth. And that's one that is just wholly untapped for Flesh and Blood. But I also understand and appreciate the sticking to the guns when it comes to Flesh and Blood is made to be played in person, and that's what it is. Again, I'm not saying that they're going to. I'm just saying it wouldn't shock me. It also wouldn't shock me if they didn't. And I would actually expect them not to. But because, again, they're a business and growth markets are important. Retention and growth. That's all it ever is. And like I said, I think that they do pretty well with retention. They have to make hard decisions a lot of the times because sometimes that's just the way of things. The XP to ELO stuff, that's a hard decision. Nobody's taking that lightly. Don't think that they are. And but ultimately it's the right thing to do. Is you eventually are gonna have to rip that Band-Aid off. Why not now? But now they have to take the people who have invested themselves into having these piles of XP from playing all their weekly armories for basically every week, and sometimes just multiples. There has to be something for them. And outside of just like the armory kits, which are great, like, don't get me wrong, I mean that they're medium, but there has to be something else that keeps those players that are kind of your local grinders happy and wanting to keep coming. So that's going to be the next challenge, is how to build that retention. And so I would expect in 5 years that they'll either have that part figured out, or we're going to just see a lot of churn. It's going to be in and out. And you'll have growth, you'll have, retraction, you'll have growth, you'll have retraction, you'll have growth, you'll have retraction. And a lot of it will really hinge on the quality of sets being released. And I shouldn't say quality is the wrong word, the interest in sets being released. Because, like, as an example, it's not that Bright Lights is a low quality set. It's a low level of interest set. It's niche interest for, a group of people that play a specific class in the game, really. And it's not that that the set is low quality. I don't believe that that's true. But I do believe that it is too narrow and too niche. Like, that's just my opinion, though. Take it or leave it. We've got one more of these, and I think that this one's probably the easiest one. This one, I'm just going to read verbatim. With other options out there and coming out, so what I put out there is stuff that Charmer actually already mentioned, which is Star Wars Unlimited, Alter TCG, Alpha Clash. You can actually throw Sorcery in there too if you want to. There's, because there's a ton of TCGs right now. It is a giant pile in market. Do you think there will be a dip in the Flesh and Blood player base, and is there room for all of these?
So the short answer is I do think that there is room for all of these. The question is whether or not they are sustainable at levels that are acceptable to the business owners or decision makers. Because I think one of the things that a lot of people sometimes, again, with that whole chase to be the next MTG, there's a lot of people who feel like if you're not like one of the biggest names in the market, then it's just not worth doing. I mean, everyone talks about you know, the next WoW killer, the next MTG killer, the next Hearthstone killer. It's always, you know, if you're not the biggest, then why are you even trying? And the reality is, you can have a successful game. You can have a successful trading card game, board game, video game, whatever, and not be the biggest and also still be entirely fine. I would point to like the Elder Scrolls Online, for example. It is still running. It is still very much enjoyed by their community. They've made tons of improvements to that game over time. As somebody who was in the closed beta test for that because of my relationship with Bethesda, I can tell you that that game is phenomenal compared to what it used to be. And is it ever going to be the WoW killer? Was it ever going to be number one? Absolutely not. But it's been successful enough, and the players that are playing it seem to really be enjoying it, and that's okay. And so, you know, I would say, you know, does Alpha Clash or Altered or Star Wars Unlimited need to, you know, be the next MTG? No. I don't even think they need to be the next Flesh and Blood. It's just a matter of whether or not, you know, with Star Wars, right? Does Fantasy Flight Games view that as a success? Or I don't know how their you know, partnership with Lucasfilm works. Maybe Lucasfilm, even if they like the results, maybe Lucasfilm says no, it's not doing what we wanted, and they put pressure there, right? It's an IP based thing. Who knows? Yeah. But I think it could totally be successful. Is just on what level. Same thing with, you know, Alpha Clash. Alpha Clash is a in the same spot Flesh and Blood used to be, right? It's a new game with its own IP trying to go from the ground up. Does it need to be, you know, the next MTG? No. Does it even need to be Flesh and Blood? Not really. Like, Flesh and Blood is where it is today 5 years later, right? So Alpha Clash is not in its 5 years later mode. Can it be successful? Absolutely. Altered is trying to do something nobody's ever done before.
Right. So that is very different.
That could very well also be successful and then still also fail, because they might have, there is a situation, because again, I don't know the logistics behind how they're going to do this, like, print and ship model. Clearly they've figured something out because they're even attempting this. But in my mind, I'm like, there could be a situation where they could theoretically have more players and still be seen as a business failure due to, like, overhead costs and what it takes to manage those shipments. And obviously you've got to protect your registration of the cards, right? Like, if the whole point, the whole gimmick is they've got some sort of, like, online system where you register your cards through, then that also means it has to be built, it has to be, you know, tested, debugged. You have to make sure that nobody can hack the system.
It has to be secure. Yeah.
Right. Has to be secure. Right. You know, you think about, like, there's all those, you know, V-Bucks scams for Fortnite. And, like, that's just for a game where you can get a different skin on your character. Like, you know, nobody cares. We're talking about a TCG. If there is an attack vector, somebody will figure it out, and they're going to have a foil collection tomorrow. You know what I mean? So, like, the game could theoretically launch, have great gameplay, and have, like, as many or more players than Flesh and Blood, but depending on how this business model works, it still might not be good enough. So just in terms of, like, appetite, I think that the appetite is there. TCGs are very popular, and there's a lot of people that are into them. And I mean, we see games come and go all the time. So there's always going to be room for, you know, new people to pick stuff up, or people to come from one game to another, or whatever. It's just a matter of, is it successful enough for the businesses? That is going to be the question. As far as, like, a dip in the fab player base, I don't see a true dip coming. There might be, like, some wiggles, but I think, like, if you look at a chart and you took a true over time, it's still going to be trending upward. I think it's going to be a bit more, you know, of a flatter, right? I don't think it's going to be as upward or exponential or even just, like, linear as it's been in those first few years. And we've already talked about why. But I do think it's still overall going to be upward because they're still expanding into new markets. This set seems like it's a big hit. The next set, when they are also doing their co-launch with, like, the Japanese language, I'm telling you right now, that's going to be a big hit.
Yeah, sure will.
So I think that they'll be fine. You know, if one, you know, time or two times in the next 5 years, if, like, you know, they see a drop in a December and a January post Worlds, and then it comes back, like, that's not going to worry me, that sort of thing. It's more like, is it dropping and continuing to drop over, you know, 6 months, 12 months? Then you have a concern. But right now, I don't see any reason to see that being the case.
Yeah, I do have concerns with Room, specifically in the competitive space, because, you know, I'm even having to pick what I want to do. and because I definitely want to play Star Wars Unlimited. I've
Mhm.
already said I'm fucking done with Lorcana. One tournament done.
Yep.
And mainly because I just don't want to deal with it. It's expensive for no reason. And like, you want to draft Lorcana, it's $25 for the packs. Like, that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
I can draft basically any other game for $10 cheaper with prize support. Like, why wouldn't I just go do that? And it's not like Lorcana is just like an infinitely better game or anything. It's not. It's fine. And that's really it. So like Star Wars Unlimited is going to catch me. Like I already know. I've played the game. I love how it feels. There's no way that I don't play a shit ton of Star Wars Unlimited. And that's regardless of my relationships with people in life that are also going to play the ever-loving shit out of Star Wars Unlimited, you know, much less two of my closest friends having a fucking podcast about it. So there is that, you know, that's going to take up time. I'm going to check out Altered. When it hits Kickstarter, I'm going to kickstart that game. Mainly because it's fucking unique. And that, I just want to try it. I want to sit down and because this looks like the TCG for people that don't like TCGs.
Yeah, it is. It does have a very board game feel,
Yeah.
which I think is, again, going to be good for
Which
it.
Sorcery
the
does too,
accessibility.
quite honestly.
Yeah, this just feels like a European board game, if I'm being entirely honest. It's really sad because by the time like this is published and is live, folks won't be able to go experiencing it. But this weekend on Board Game Arena, like that you could demo the game. They have like a digital thing set up and you can actually go play with the starter decks. So like as far as checking out the gameplay, if you haven't done that, Logan, I would recommend going to do it. I can send you a link.
I'll be in Hartford.
No, it's like this week, like right now.
Oh,
like,
right now.
Like you can go right now. That's what I'm saying. By the time this goes live, it will have ended. It ends on Monday.
Okay.
But like if you want the link, I can send you the link. Like,
yeah,
you can
sure.
play
Ship it
with the starter decks and whatever right now. But it's interesting. Like I said, the gameplay is different. The printing and whatever is different. And so like I'm willing to check it out because I like it when anybody tries to innovate. But
yeah.
So I guess I would say that when I say that I think there's room, I don't necessarily mean room in my life. I just meant in terms of like players, because I look at, you know, for example, this weekend that Bandai just had, and they had Battle Spirit Saga, and they had One Piece, and they had Digimon, and now they have also got their Dragon Ball, you know, revamp coming soon. So all those games all also have players. There's just no way Bandai is able to support all four of them. At some point, they're going to fold up. And so some of those players will go play other Bandai games. Some of those players will fall out. But I also look at, now granted, a lot of this is driven by intellectual property, and I am fully aware of that. But this also tells me that there's at least some baseline interest in people where they are willing to try a card game, because One Piece events continue to like sell out. They're always limited number of entrants, and they're always gone, right? Just immediately gone. So there's an interest for card games out there, and all it's going to take is somebody to have the right cross section of interests where they're like, man, I wanted to do the One Piece thing, but I didn't get to sign up for my regional thing. So, you know, I like Star Wars, maybe I'll check that out. Or, you know, I like, you know, superhero stuff, I'll check out Alpha Clash. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be, I think that there's enough room as far as like players and player interests. It just might not be enough room for me personally, because I have all the interests.
So I think that's part of it. Is I really feel like the next game that really plants its flag for competitive play in a positive way will carve out a ongoing community and niche. Basically because you're going to draw the people who, you know, because most people have room for two games, like they do, and that lets you get in to be somebody's second game, you know, and you might become their primary. Like that flag planting of like, we have competitive play, we have organized play, here's the outline, here's what we're doing, this isn't going to change, this is set in stone, you know, we're going to guarantee this. That means a ton. That's faith, right? And so the first TCG, and it could be Alpha Clash with the event in Vegas in April, but the first TCG that does that, or the next TCG that does that, probably is going to have quite a bit of a head start. So I think that that's also something to keep an eye on. But I honestly think that, you know, you do realize that Lorcana would have been dead by now if it wasn't Disney, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, just making sure that we understood that.
100%.
Okay, like, you know what? We're gonna be about an hour and a half. It's gonna feel fine. Let's go to the one listener question I had. I went to the archives because nobody asked any, and grabbed a pretty easy one. I guess.
Says you. Get ready for my dissertation. You know all these hypotheticals. I come ready.
Oh, I know.
So I don't know why you.
I'm gonna answer it first,
okay,
because it's gonna be short. The question.
I'll do mine shortly as well, but
the question is from Donnie K. It is, which non-shadow hero do you think would make the best Doctor Who villain? Okay, so quickly, I know I brought this up before. I don't fucking like Doctor Who. I just think it's worse Star Trek The Next Generation. Why wouldn't I just go watch Star Trek The Next Generation? That being said, the answer is Prism. That's the answer.
Yep.
Know-it-all, thinks that they're doing the right thing and is making shitty decisions the entire time, is just fucking everything up. But
so here's the thing. My answer for number 1 slot is also Prism. But that's because Prism is just the Weeping Angels.
Also true. It could be that, because the Weeping Angels.
My number 2 is Data Doll, because she, whether you want her to be a Dalek or a Cyberman. Cyberman, yep, doesn't matter. She's the machine enemy, and then the Emperor is Davros, basically, like,
or the Master or whatever.
Well, the only reason I give Davros is because he's like specifically like the fascist overlord, whatever, and that's the Emperor. Also, I'm pretty sure he was like dead at one point and then was tried to get brought back to life, and so that's totally the Emperor, right? Like the Emperor is just Davros, so
that's fair.
One of those 3, but I go with Prism because fuck Prism.
Right. Honestly, I could give a long explanation of why Prism makes sense here, but honestly, it all just boils down to fuck Prism. Like, that's it.
Yep.
Yeah, you did. You actually kept that really short. I'm very proud of you. Like, uncomfortably proud of you.
Yeah. Well,
not sure what I'm supposed to do with that. Outside of be discomforted. Okay. We're going to thank some patrons. How about that?
Sounds good.
Should we thank all of them, or should we thank the we'll just thank the associate producers on up. So associate producers are Alex, Andy, C-Dubs, Cindra, the aforementioned Donnie K, Jacob, Kenny, Larry, and the Salty Sea Cat. Our executive producers on up are Belay Storm, valued member of the Patreon. Dom, who is the official Discord complaints department for Flesh and Pod. Lance, good thrust. You always got to make sure that if you're thrusting good, it's with Lance. Matt Two Tokes, Pucks on us, Papa Mike, Philip, Rich, Taylor, and Trevor. If you are interested in becoming a member of the Patreon, you go to patreon.com/fleshandpod. Link is in the show notes. There are 6 tiers. I keep saying 6. I don't even know if it's 6. It's some number around that, I think. But yeah, you can join that way. Any paid tier gets you to Fab After Dark, which is just our kind of vibe show that we do once a month with Greg from Greg. I guess Greg's just from Greg. Greg is from the cleaning closet at the old folks home he used to work at, and Bryn from the Banished Zone whenever she decides to record that fucking show. And we just it's not recorded. We kind of just do whatever we want. It's really meant to be more of a safe space, freeform discussion type of thing. People seem to really enjoy it, so we just keep doing it monthly. It's fun. If you need to get a hold of the show, you can contact us on Twitter at FleshPod. You can send us an email at fleshpod@gmail.com. Those links are all in the show notes. Easiest way to get at us, though, is to just go and join our Discord server, which is also in the show notes. The link to join that is, and you do not have to be a member of the Patreon or anything else to join. It's free to join.
just public. Just join it, and then you can type things while we're recording, and Logan will answer.
Oh my god, you fucking dipshit!
Don't be so hard on yourself. Don't call yourself names. That's my friend you're talking about.
My god, where can they find you?
Here, doing this.
Yeah,
but also in the Discord that's open to the public. And then if you want to see long-winded rants on Twitter, you can find me there.
Video scrolling of a person's like history.
Hey, listen. To be fair, first of all, that person tried to come back. They should have just taken the L, but they tried to come back and say that I was slut-shaming those women, which is also comical, because if you ever check my Twitter history, I'm firmly in favor of any woman making money however they want with their own body. Get that bread. Sex work is real work, and if you want to do it, and I just encourage you to be safe, and I actually think that's the bonus of like OnlyFans stuff, because now they get to have control of all of it. But I've never been derogatory. Also, I'm not the one who used the word slut. He did in his own like defense, so whatever. But it's comical because he missed the point entirely. My point wasn't a criticism of his desires. He's an adult, I assume. Like, you do you, buddy. Whatever floats your boat. However, his entire thing was that LSS needed to do more to market. And so I was criticizing his ability to find information, because if he can go on Twitter and find like a couple hundred OnlyFans accounts and like their content, he can fucking follow LSS, because he was literally in that same thread saying Twitter posts on Twitter aren't good enough for getting the info out. And it's like, well, that's good enough for your OnlyFans models. Why couldn't it be good enough for LSS? And then he was talking about, all these people, blah, blah, blah. And basically, here's the scenario. For those of you who don't know, this was all a complaint because LSS didn't, in his mind, put out enough communication about the change from XP to ELO for Nats, in which case it's like he's upset for this made up person who doesn't exist, where somehow you are invested enough in the game and you go to enough events that you can actually grind to an XP threshold. So that means you're going to event after event after event, and now you're somehow surprised or taken off guard because you didn't know it was ELO and not XP. I would assume like you would have heard that at an event, or that if you were that invested and you wanted to compete, you would check an official source like their website, or
have a fucking gem account and log onto the website.
Right. Well, later he responded to Flake saying something like, well, LSS has, everybody's email if they've registered for a gem account, which is technically true, but he's not understanding the logistics here, which is that you can't just like send an email because you have someone's account, because you don't want to flood mail servers, but you also want to make sure that they're whitelisted. Most of these places, most businesses use an external mail sending service to ensure that it doesn't go to people's spam, et cetera, which means you are paying. Now, why would I pay to send an email to literally all of my registered users for the less than 100 people that would fit into this made up scenario of I'm a grinding XP nonstop, but somehow don't pay attention enough to know about the change? Yeah. Like, guy was just asinine, just L's all around. So
yeah, I mean, some people just don't know to take the L.
Sometimes I dunk people too when I'm off my meds.
When you're off your meds, yeah, and then you slut shame Mara, and so I guess that
she deserves it. But
okay, fine. But it's now been an hour and a half, so it's not like
I had to get us back to the threshold.
Yeah, we got to make sure we hit our targets. So, that's all we got this week. Next week, we'll. I still haven't taken that break that I really wanted to take, have I?
You did, actually.
When?
On the boat?
But I still
you took a break.
Oh, I took a break. But I still recorded a show.
There's still a break.
Well, okay, fuck it.
Sometimes you work through your breaks, man. This is America.
That is the most depressing thing I've heard today. And I watched the Lions game. Okay. Well, we'll be back for episode 114 next week. We'll talk calling Hartford and yada, yada, yada. Maybe we'll bring Flake on. That seems like a good idea. Or the worst idea, one of the two. It's usually pretty good, though. Flip a coin. But we'll be here next week regardless. So I guess we'll talk to y'all then. Bye.